Adede was born under heavy shadows, but he grew into a man who carried light. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to read the world, he was the kind of man whose presence turned heads in Kamuga village. His cleverness matched his looks. He could solve disputes with wit, calculate harvest yields faster than the elders, and charm children with riddles under the shade of the great Kibaga tree, where the Luo elders often gathered to deliberate. Yet despite his gifts, Adede's life was marked by rejection. His birth through violence was a story whispered in corners, and though he had proven himself many times, the stigma lingered. His mother, protective and cautious, believed that only a woman whose family background she knew well could marry her son. She rejected proposals from women who adored Adede's charm, insisting, "A home must be built on a foundation we understand." This insistence became Adede's burden. Suitors came, but his mother's scrutiny sent them away. The rejections piled up like stones, each one heavier than the last. Villagers began to murmur, "How can a man so handsome, so clever, remain unmarried?" Some mocked him, others pitied him, but Adede endured, his dignity intact. Land disputes added to his trials. As the eldest, he was expected to defend his mother's portion against encroaching relatives. Some argued he had no rightful claim since his father was unknown, but Adede, with sharp reasoning and unshakable courage, stood firm. He reminded them that land was not just inheritance, it was sweat, memory, and the soil that fed them all. His words under the Kibaga tree often silenced even the most stubborn voices. Still, each victory left him weary, for he knew he was fighting not just for land, but for recognition. Despite his triumphs, loneliness gnawed at him. At night, when the crickets sang and the moon lit the thatched roofs of Kamuga, Adede would sit outside his hut, staring at the stars. He longed for a partner who would see beyond the whispers, someone who would walk beside him, not because of land or cattle, but because of love. His cleverness and handsomeness drew admiration, but his mother's rigid beliefs kept doors closed. His heart remained a locked granary, full but inaccessible. One day, during a village meeting under the Kibaga tree, Adede spoke with such wisdom about unity and fairness that even the elders nodded in respect. He reminded them that division was like a cracked pot. It could hold nothing. Among the crowd was Achieng, a teacher from a neighboring village. She admired not just his looks, but the strength of his mind and the gentleness in his voice. When she approached him later, she said, "A man is not defined by the story of his birth, but by the story he chooses to write." Adede smiled, knowing that perhaps, at last, someone had seen him for who he truly was. Their friendship blossomed into quiet companionship. Achieng would visit Kamuga, bringing books for the children and stories for Adede. She listened when he spoke of his burdens, and he marveled at her courage to stand beside him despite the whispers. Slowly, the villagers began to see them together, and the murmurs shifted. Where once there was pity, now there was curiosity, even admiration. His mother, at first resistant, watched Achieng's kindness. She saw how the teacher respected traditions yet carried her own strength. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she told Adede, "Perhaps the foundation I sought was not in lineage, but in character. This woman carries a home within her heart." For the first time, Adede felt the shadows of his birth begin to lift. He realized that love, like land, was not inherited, it was cultivated. And with Achieng by his side, he was ready to plant seeds for a future that was truly his own. When the elders of Kamuga gathered to prepare the bride prize for Achieng, drums echoed across the homesteads. Cattle were counted, and songs of union hummed under the Kibaga tree. Adede, proud yet humble, walked at the front of the procession, believing that at last his loneliness would end. But the journey to Achieng's village was heavy with unseen clouds. Whispers had reached her kin. His father is unknown. His bloodline is shadowed. In Luo tradition, lineage was not just memory. It was the rope that tied families together. Without it, some said, a man stood rootless like a tree planted in sand. When Adede and his people arrived, Achieng stepped forward, her face stern though her belly carried the seed of his love. She spoke before her elders and his, "I cannot be wife to a man whose father is unknown. My child will know his blood, but I will not bind myself to a house built on whispers." Her words fell like stones in the courtyard. Adede's heart cracked, yet he stood tall, refusing to beg. The bride prize was accepted, not for Achieng herself, but for the child she carried. In silence, cattle were led away, money exchanged, and the elders declared, The child belongs to Adede's house, but the mother remains her own. Thus, Achieng handed over the infant when the time came, swaddled in cloth, eyes bright like dawn. She did not cross into Adede's homestead, but returned to her own, leaving him with both joy and sorrow. In Kamuga, people sang of the strange union, a bride price paid, yet no bride taken. Children whispered that Adede's son was born of love but carried the burden of rejection. Elders shook their heads, saying, "This is what happens when shadows follow a man's birth." Adede raised the child with fierce devotion. He taught him riddles under the Kibaga tree, showed him how to measure harvests, and whispered courage into his ears. Yet at night, when the moon rose, Adede's heart ached for the woman who had seen his light but refused his hand. So the tale of Adede became a lesson in Kamuga, that a man may carry wisdom, beauty, and courage, yet the weight of lineage can bend his path. Love may bloom, but tradition can prune it. And sometimes the bride prize buys not a wife, but only the future of a child. Adede raised his son Awar with fierce devotion. The whispers followed the boy. He is born of a father unknown and a mother who refused the homestead. Adede poured into him the wisdom of the Kibaga tree. He taught him riddles, the rhythm of harvests, and the courage to speak truth even when voices rose against him. Awar grew tall like his father, but his eyes carried a fire that was his own. Where Adede had endured silence, Awar questioned. Where Adede had bowed to tradition, Awar challenged. As he came of age, Awar faced the same taunts his father had known. Cousins mocked him during wrestling matches. "You wrestle with strength, but whose blood runs in your veins?" Elders hesitated to let him lead dances or sit in councils, saying lineage was the rope that bound trust. But Awar refused to shrink. He declared, "A man's worth is not in the shadow of his father's name, but in the light of his deeds." His words spread among the youth, who had grown weary of old divisions. One season, a great drought struck Kamuga. Wells dried, cattle weakened, and disputes over water nearly tore families apart. Elders argued endlessly, each clan guarding its own. Awar, though young, stood beneath the Kibaga tree and spoke. "If lineage is the rope that ties us, then water is the river that feeds us. Will you let thirst kill your children because you guard a name? Let us share, not as clans, but as people of Kamuga." His voice carried like thunder. Even the most stubborn elders fell silent. For the first time, the village acted not by clan, but by unity. From that day, Awar was no longer called the son of an unknown father. He was called the son of Kamuga. His leadership proved that deeds could outweigh bloodlines, and his courage became a new measure of worth. Adede, watching from the edge of the gathering, felt tears burn his eyes. The burden that had bent his back was lifted by his son's defiance. Where he had been rejected, Awar was embraced. Thus the tale of Adede and Awar became a generational song. That shadows may follow a man, but his children can walk into light. That tradition may bind, but courage can untie. And that lineage, though honored, is not greater than the deeds that sustain a people. In Kamuga, mothers began to tell their children, "Remember Awar, son of Adede. He was born of whispers, but he spoke with thunder." Awar grew up under the same whispers that had haunted his father. Children teased him. "Your grandfather's name is wind. Your bloodline is smoke." Elders hesitated to let him lead dances or sit in councils, for in their eyes, lineage was the rope that bound trust. But Adede had raised him with riddles, courage, and the wisdom of the Kibaga tree. Awar learned early that silence could be broken and shame could be answered with deeds. Where Adede endured, Awar challenged. He wrestled with cousins who mocked him, and when they fell, he declared, "Strength is not inherited, it is earned." He spoke boldly in gatherings, questioning traditions that chained men to shadows. His words unsettled the elders, but they stirred the youth. Many had grown weary of clan divisions, of names used as weapons. Awar's defiance became their song. One season, Kamuga faced a great drought. Wells dried, cattle weakened, and families quarreled over water. Elders argued endlessly, each clan guarding its own. Awar stood beneath the Kibaga tree and spoke. "If lineage is the rope that ties us, then water is the river that feeds us. Will you let thirst kill your children because you guard a name? Let us share, not as clans, but as people of Kamuga."